but basically a value add property is something you buy for below market value because the property is significantly messed up in bad condition, for lack of a better word. So you have to go in there and put significant capital expenses into the property to make the property new again, presentable again, so you can get the highest market value rents. And when you get the highest market value rents, you get the highest market value price because rents correlate directly with price. So um, basically, it means you're fixing up the property. So if you buy a value add house, you're fixing up the property, replacing the kitchens, the bathrooms, the flooring, all that stuff. So
Who's this? Oh, you're an entrepreneur? Oh, you're a real estate investor. Oh, you're trying to learn from those who did it. Well, come into the lab then. Put your white coat on, gloves on, notepad, and let's build, y'all.
Experiment Nation, what is going on? Ruben here, your host, and I'm very excited to have this gentleman come into the lab with us today because we were just talking offline, and I love me some vertical integration. And for those of you who don't know, vertical integration is when you are solving not only your own problem, but you also have a business that is able to serve others, solve the same problem. Reason I love it is you're able to learn from your own experiments, as I call them, and learn from those of your clients, and as well have insight into the marketplace. So I'm very happy to have this gentleman come and step into the lab and show us the other side of the world on the multifamily side, owning a brokerage, being able to serve clients as well, and being able to still source his own deals for him and his partners. Without further ado, welcome Jason Lee to the lab. How's it going, brother?
Ruben, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. Appreciate it.
Absolutely, man. Hey, listen, I was just saying, we were talking about this offline, man. I've been traveling, a lot of airports and stuff. You're asking me why I have this podcast. My gosh, it means to connect with people like you, right? Find out what you're doing. So I always like to ask the question of, if I meet you at the airport and, I like the network. So my wife always taps me. It's like, stop talking to people. I'm like, I want to talk, man. I want to find out what this guy looks interesting. What's up? I'll shake your hand and be like, what's going on, man? Sit next to you on the plane and be like, hey, man, what do you do for a living? What do you usually open up that next line with?
I love that question. I mean, yeah, if we were, sitting on the plane together, we're both bored, want to spark conversation, you ask me that question, probably give you a short answer. I'm not super talkative, but I'm more of a listener myself. I like learning about other people. I am a networker too, but if you ask me that question, I would just say, I live in San Diego and I own a commercial real estate brokerage. We've got 11 agents and we've done, a good number of transactions. We've done about 150 in the last 2 years. And then we got the other side of my business where I also, syndicate and raise money for our development plays here in San Diego. So I kind of have two businesses, but both in the real estate world. So that'd be my quick and easy answer for you.
That's very interesting. So in short, you're a real estate investor and you specialize in the multifamily, right?
Yep, we specialize in multifamily. We sell a little bit of like other commercial asset classes. Like I've sold some retail buildings, some Jack in the Boxes, Starbucks, and some industrial properties. But yeah, mostly like 95% multifamily.
Got it. Now, LinkedIn tells me, and the reason I say LinkedIn, I'm going to source LinkedIn because we know as investors, we're constantly growing our portfolio, right? Like, I told you I was on the contract for one right now. So LinkedIn tells me, right, that uh, you have about 50 million assets under your portfolio. Is that current? Has that changed? Is that still the case when it comes to your portfolio?
I'd say it's pretty close. We've sold some stuff and we bought some stuff, so I'd say it's
Mhm.
pretty similar. That's pretty updated. So yeah, it's up to par.
So let's talk about that. Currently, when someone would ask me, am I, what kind of investment I like to buy and hold? You obviously have a very different. I shouldn't say very different. You're an investor, but it sounds like you've liquidated some as well. Can you give us a little insight as to why and when are these value adds with an exit strategy with partners? What's the play there with the exit?
Yeah, so My whole thing is I believe in maximizing your return potential. And I ran the
Mm,
numbers because the best ways to exit a property is to, the top two ways is to buy a property, fix it up, add a lot of value, build that sweat equity, and then do a cash out refinance or do a 1031 exchange, defer capital gains, and trade up into a larger asset. So I help clients 1031 all the time. That's like what our brokerage specializes in. We help clients trade up and move into bigger complexes.
mm.
And since I know that game, I kind of just like ran the numbers. Like, would I be growing my wealth faster if I just kept doing refinances or if I kept exchanging? And the wealthiest investors that I've worked with, some, 100 million to $1 billion range investors, they all traded up from smaller buildings into larger assets. So that was my plan. So I only sell if I own like a small asset, like a 2 to 6 unit property, and I'll go out and buy or combine funds with another property and buy like a 20 unit building or a 16 unit building. So I'm not playing in the 100 unit space because I am in San Diego. A 100 unit building in San Diego is like, you know, like 40 to $50 million. So I can't play in that space yet. But yeah, so that's my main exit strategy. But we also do ground up development. We started just doing value add, fixing properties up. But as you may know, tenant laws in California are getting stricter and stricter. But San Diego is like the last city where you can still do a value add plan and move tenants out and do your thing. But it's going in the wrong direction. But the thing that's great about California or about San Diego, Southern California, is that we're landlocked. So we have the best weather in the country in San Diego, but we've got the coast to the left, to the west. We've got the desert to the east where the weather sucks, nothing's out there, and then we got the border to the south, and we got a huge army base, Camp Pendleton, north of San Diego. So San Diego is a very small plot of land, but it's a very desirable plot of land, and we're 70,000 units behind on housing. So we've been able to take advantage of the new zoning laws that have changed in San Diego to support higher density apartment buildings, and we've been we have 4 or 5 projects in planning right now for multifamily development.
Okay, so you said a lot that I want to unpack, and I'm always taking notes in the lab because it's, I pay attention when you speak, right? So I want to go back to the trading up for a second
Hmm.
because trading up, I would love for you to, I hear it, but I think it's really important for our listeners to see it tactically, right? So let's talk about maybe a case study that you have or what trading up look like. And typically trading up, what does that time period between the trade up look like? Are you doing value add between the time you're doing trade up, or are you actually just streamlining operations, increasing your gross operating income? Like, what's happening during that time, and how long does it take until you feel that you're ready to trade up? And again, per property basis, I would love to know how you assess the, okay, it's time, or is it even predetermined? When you buy the asset, you already know exactly what you're going to do, how long you're going to be in it for, and with respect to the right deal, then you trade up. Can you talk to us about like what goes behind the scenes of that timeline, the decision, and the process?
Yeah, I'll give you an example of a case study that I did. I've done multiple, so I can just give you one. But before I say that, I'll go over the rules because there are IRS guidelines. So
Mm,
a 1031 exchange, it's an IRS tax, 1031 tax deferred exchange. What it is in the simplest terms, I don't want to confuse your viewers, but you can search it on Google. But in layman's terms, a 1031 exchange is where you can sell a like kind property or sell a property and buy a like kind property. So if you sell an investment property, you can buy another investment property if it's the same price or greater. So the reason why I say like kind property is because you can't do an exchange into a primary home. If it's your primary residence, it doesn't qualify as an exchange. You have to pay taxes on the capital gains that you sold the property for. So when you do a 1031 exchange, there's two like really important rules I want you to remember. One is that there's timelines. So after you sell a property, like for example, I sold a fourplex in Chula Vista for $2 million bucks and in San Diego. And after I sold that property, I had 45 days after I closed to identify a property to purchase. So I have 45 days to identify 3 properties, and I have to close on at least one. But after I identify the 3 properties, I have 6 months to close, 180 days from the day I closed on the property that I sold. So that's like the most important thing to remember, is the time frames. And there's other types of exchanges too that I can go into, but just for like to be simple sake, that's what it is. For the case study, the reason why I like it so much is because, when you add a lot of value, like you said, when you add a lot of value to a property, right now it takes me anywhere from 3 to 6 months to renovate, depending on how serious the renovation is and how many permits I have to pull and how many major systems like the roof, electrical, plumbing that I'm replacing. If I'm doing all the major systems, it takes a long time, like 6 to 9 months. But if it's like a quick turn in and out, interior renovations, exterior paint, very fast. But um, to
Now,
answer your, yeah,
question on that, because I
yeah.
want to make this definitely a dialogue. When you do this value add for 6 to 9 months, is it best practice to then be able to show that you've been able to raise rent, increase gross operating income for a certain period of time? Is it like a year? Is it a couple months? Or can you go right back to the bank and say, hey, listen, I made these updates, but they might say, hey, show us the rent roll, show us the receipts. And you might be like, well, I don't have enough time yet. So I want to just be very clear for our listeners. What's that best practice timeline? Is there a hard rule? Does it depend from lender to lender? How do you justify now the work that you've put in? How does that equate into what we call value add?
So it's a two-part question because there's 2 different kinds of loans in my business. There's the residential loans, typical Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and then there's the commercial loans when you go 5 units and above in size and multifamily. So when you buy a 2 to 4 unit property or a 1 to 4 unit property, it's considered a residential loan. And when you fix up a property and you go to refinance it to pull your cash out, right, to get your money back that you put into the property, you want to have at least 6 to 12 months, depending on the lender, on the bank, but 6 to 12 months since you bought the property, to go and refinance it. Because if you try to do it like in month 3 or month 4, they'll probably deny you. But like 6 months is like the minimum you have to own a property to go back and refinance and reappraise it and get a new loan. Some banks is typically a year of seasoning. And then for the commercial loans, commercial loans, they care about the property, so they care about the cash flow. So when you go to refinance a commercial loan, you have to make sure that all your tenants have been in there, fully rented. You have proof of profit and loss statements for at least 3 months. Some banks are really aggressive and will say like 1 to 2 months is fine, but I typically see at least 3 to 6 months of seasoning of like income coming in, showing the lender that, hey, these tenants are legit. These leases are good. They're all paying rent. The expenses are here. So we can give you loan dollars based on your cash flow because commercial banks give you loans based on cash flow, not based on just your personal DTI. They care about the property more than
Hmm.
the actual borrower. So
So
that's the answer to that.
that's very interesting, Jason. So basically, you're telling me that I'm just going to put this case study that if you were to buy an asset, let's say you buy, I don't know, 20 unit asset, you let's say it was, I don't know, 65% occupied. You're able to just do your typical. Actually, I should let you tell me. Once you help me build this case study, you buy a 20 unit apartment. It's 65% occupied. What are your typical go tos? And then I'll help kind of tie in my question to that when you're doing your value add. So again, every deal is different, but just typical.
Are you asking me like what kind of loan I'm getting when I buy that property?
No, what kind of value add work are you putting on that? What does value add mean for someone who's listening? Be like, okay, I hear it, but what does that even mean?
Yeah, I mean, it's a term thrown around a lot in real estate, but basically a value add property is something you buy for below market value because the property is significantly messed up in bad condition, for lack of a better word. So you have to go in there and put significant capital expenses into the property to make the property new again, presentable again, so you can get the highest market value rents. And when you get the highest market value rents, you get the highest market value price because rents correlate directly with price. So um, basically, it means you're fixing up the property. So if you buy a value add house, you're fixing up the property, replacing the kitchens, the bathrooms, the flooring, all that stuff. So
Is
yeah,
that typical? That's where I was getting at. Is that typical, or is there one thing that you usually go to? Hey, Ruben, most of my deals, I typically go straight to the floors because floors where the value is at. Then I go to the kitchen. Like, what's typical for you as far as when you're tactically value adding? Is where I was getting at. Exactly, just that.
yeah. Well, we care all about the end buyer, so we want to make sure we deliver a product that the buyer that buys the property is going to like in the future. So it depends deal by deal. Like if I buy property A and everything is fine, but the interiors are completely messed up, then I'll replace everything inside. I'll replace the flooring, the kitchen, the bathrooms. It's got to have good appeal so that a tenant pays, the highest rent. I got to put in new finishes, new quartz countertops, white shaker cabinets, stainless steel appliances. Got to paint it. Got to put in good fixtures, new ceiling fans, all that kind of stuff. But those the items that I just mentioned that I listed, those are what adds a lot of value to your property because those items that the tenants see and touch, that's what they pay the high rent for. But if you buy a property where, the electrical is ruined, the roof is ruined, the foundation's messed up, like this is all deferred maintenance. And what deferred maintenance is that when you renovate and replace these items, it doesn't add that much value to the property because that's like the bones of the property. The property should have that, in there in order to be operating. So, um, but if any major system is messed up, like if I buy a property and the roof is shot and it's leaking, I have to replace it. But it's not going to add that much value, if at all, to my property because when I replace a roof, my rents don't go up. So to answer
Mm.
your question, um, spending money on things that makes your rent go up, your income go up, are what adds the most value to your property value.
Nice. And is there a term for that? So, because I'm so glad you went there. You said that's such a good way. I haven't really heard anyone kind of highlight that, and I love the way you just did that. One is there's levels between, or actually maybe it's me. So you tell me when you say value add, are you talking about specifically things that will increase your cash flow, and where does a deferred maintenance, does that fall into its own bucket? Like when you say value add, are you actually including like fixing a roof, or is that for you, does that just mean specifically cash flow generating I guess tasks that if you do them, you know that you'll shoot up the uh, the property value?
Well, we have our capital expense budget, quantified out. Like, for example, kitchens have their own light item, roof has their own light item. But when we're buying a property, we always inspect it. We do our inspections with our contractor, we walk it with our subcontractors, and we see, what work has to go into it. So we have a budget built before we even remove contingencies and buy a property.
Mhm.
So we know all our numbers very well before actually closing on the deal. And to answer your question about deferred maintenance, what I mean by that is that if you add value, like let's say it's kind of weird. Add value just means like you're buying a property where you can go in day one and you can take the property from 700K to $1 million if you do X, Y, and Z. So that's what value add means.
Yeah.
Is if I buy this property, I'm going to put in money into it. I'm going to make a profit, get my money back, or exchange and go into a larger asset or cash out, whatever you
Yeah.
want to do. So, yeah.
And that makes sense, Jason. And the really only reason I'm pinpointing it is because I think it's very important for us to realize that like you may need, double pane windows to increase insulation or whatever, right? So that you're not losing as much. But like that intrinsic value doesn't necessarily like you don't necessarily get to charge more for that. You have to think about the end user of like, oh, okay, yeah, like luxury vinyl plank floors is much better than whatever they had before. Like that increases the value. So I think the reason I
Yeah.
was kind of getting granular, it's not so much to be like, why is he focusing so much on value add? Like I think it's so interesting because when you get granular into the business, you realize that hey, like we might be spending like 100K on this, and that's just because we have to in order to make this a compliant, functional, up to code. But there's no way you can just tell the tenant, hey, by the way, like I got you a new roof, so therefore like it's gonna be $300 more, like So I think there's a difference, and I just wanted to highlight that because I'm sure that you guys look into that when you're buying an asset that that hey, you know visually or aesthetically this is going to be more pleasing and you'll be able to justify higher rents, but then this is an expense that it's deferred maintenance and we got to do it anyway, and it's, it is what it is. Like that's the cost of doing business almost, right? I mean, did I summarize that like accurately, or I just want to make sure that I brought that point home?
No, you did completely. I think that I'm really happy that you actually brought that up because, and like got so granular because people don't really understand where to spend money when they first start because there are ways you can waste money and you shouldn't have wasted it. Like, for example, if you have a choice to buy luxury vinyl plank flooring and you're in a Class C area and you're dealing with a lower, quality demographic, they're not going to care that you have the best flooring in town. But if you're in like the best part of San Diego or best part of anywhere, Atlanta, and these are all like white collar tenants, they're going to care about good finishes. So you want to spend the money to improve your finishes to make sure you get the highest rent possible. But you have to know where you're located, what finish to choose, and you have to understand what actually adds the most amount of value if you have a certain amount of budget. Because most people that buy properties, when they first get started, they can't replace everything, even if it needs everything. So you got to pick and choose sometimes. Like, if I leave the bathroom because it looks okay, but I just replace the kitchen, I know that the kitchen has a higher value add potential on my rents. So I'm going to do the kitchen, but not the bathroom yet. I'm going to get cash flow first from this tenant. And, you have to be tenant obsessed when you buy multifamily properties because, let me ask you a question, Ruben. If you go into a unit and it's a 2-unit property, but one unit has, you know, AC, heating, washer and dryer in unit, you have 3 parking spaces, you have huge bedrooms, you have luxury vinyl plank flooring, you have a new kitchen, new bathroom, everything is redone to the highest finish possible. And in this unit, it has all that, except it doesn't have AC and heating and no washer and dryer. Which unit are you going to pay more money for?
Hey man, I gotta have my AC on, man. It's hot Atlanta over here, so I ain't playing with that, Jason.
Yeah.
Experiment Nation, you've heard the word MTR, mid-term rentals, as it is currently a hot topic and hot commodity right now because, again, there has been an increase in short-term rental regulations, and there also has been, let's face it, a slowdown in what we were experiencing a couple years back when it comes to bookings. So with that said, short-term rental operators are looking for alternative solutions to tap into the mid-term rental space. However, there is a sub niche of mid-term rental insurance that I'm truly excited about, that I want to share with you, that the experience that we've had, the tremendous results we've been able to have, and that's the insurance mid-term rental space, which is very different than your traditional mid-term rentals. When you think of traditionally mid-term rentals, you think of travel nurses. There is a space, mid-term rental insurance space, that we've tapped in, where you need to be well connected with insurance and relocation specialists and companies and understand the right type of asset required for you to be able to help these families. What's really important that stands out the most, which you can get in what I'm about to offer you, is the understanding where to be found by these insurance companies, how to properly manage your calendar so that your listings are optimized so that they can find you, how to actually gain traction and build a relationship with these relocation insurance companies. I've put together an MTR insurance blueprint. That's MMTRRR insurance blueprint to cover these foundations after we've had success landing very large contracts on single family homes that literally 4x what we traditionally make in long-term rentals, and also gives us peace of mind because there's less turnover and 100% occupancy, because these contracts can start anywhere from 30 days to 3 months to 8 months and range anywhere from, again, we've landed anywhere from $8,000 to $9,000 a month in per month on a single family home property, which our mortgages are typically around the 2,400 range, which then gives you a large spread of anywhere from 4 to 6K net on just one property. And this is why it's very hot right now. But people who haven't been in the lab with individuals like myself, like Jesse Vasquez and Dr. Rachel Gainsborough and Noble Crawford, don't have the foundations and don't know exactly where to start. And therefore, this is why I'm giving you guys a blueprint, the MTRR insurance blueprint, go to the website experimentrealestate.com and get yourself a blueprint to completely change or at least have a plan B if you're a short-term rental operator looking to maximize your occupancy and profitability. We'll see you on the other side. So
Yeah.
100%. So I love that tenant focus, and I love that because it's sometimes we work in our silos and it's like investor, and you forget who the end client is, like who at the end is gonna be able to pick this property in this zip code in this neighborhood over another, right? So thank you for that. And by the way, that was a great call out because I think when I think even in our space in the single family space, and we're thinking of value add in the kitchen sell, right? I mean that's a big thing. Is there any other one that comes to mind that like typically like if you were tight on budget and you had to spend money and you needed to just make it rain as soon as possible? And what are some of your go-tos and sweet spots so that we understand how you think?
Yeah, honestly, the answer might not be what you expect, but if you put in like all new, like fresh interior coat of paint, like it makes a property look so much better. The unit looks so much better. So I think paint is super cheap and super effective.
Love it.
So if you have a small budget and you can't replace everything, make sure you paint, like repaint the unit if it has bad paint, because if it's old and it's a bad color and it's dull, I promise you, if you put a fresh white coat of paint on there, your units can look so much better and show so much better. But I'd say
Mm,
paint is the most cost effective. And then I'd say like the thing that you can renovate that will give you the most juice in rental increase, which means you'll have the highest property value increase. Like you said, it's definitely the kitchens, but I've realized that there's a significant difference in renting a unit with no washer and dryer versus a washer and dryer. Like people hate common area laundry. I know
yeah.
I did too when I had it. So,
I need to pull
um,
my wife into this podcast. 100%.
yeah,
Like that was like, and I'm like, why do you? And it's crazy because I was the one doing it before, and I'm like, why do you care so much? Because we came from New York, right? And New York is like,
yeah,
it's hard to find a washer dryer in unit when you're living there. That was like top on the list, like 100%. Like I hear you, and it's funny. I just want to echo that because like you're not bullshitting. Like this is real. Like my wife was like, this is top of my list. I'm like, oh, that's interesting because I wouldn't, as an investor, if I'm thinking I wasn't thinking that, but when you think about tenant facing, 100%, I lived it.
yeah.
So
And if you're in like a crowded area, like downtown metro or something, like parking is also so valuable. Like if you
mm,
have just like dead front yard space, you can add like one or two parking spaces. It adds so much value to your property because parking is a hot commodity in like metros and busy streets, and everyone hates parking on the street. So people will always pay a couple $100 more if they have a nice parking spot they can rely on when they come home from work on 5:30 p.m., 6 p.m.
yeah, well, that's what I was gonna say too. And we talk about gross operating income, or even or I should say net operating income because that's what you're watching. But that adds right to the you're able to have a couple $100 a month, for a parking spot, and depending on how many you have, and they're paying that annually or monthly, I should say, right? That's gonna add up, right?
Yeah.
So okay, so thank you for bringing me here, Jason, because you're helping me build the case study. So now that we have that full understanding of how you think, you got a 20 unit, it's 65% occupied. uh with the knowledge that we have, Jason is my partner on this. He told me, and again, not it's case by case. I just want to build a case study here. I'm not saying this is what you do every time, but you come in, add fresh paint, do the kitchen, create a parking lot, etc. And you're telling me, that again, depending on the work, guys, it's just a case study. I highlight this because this is how I think based on case studies. Let's say it takes you what you say 3 to 6 months. Takes you eh,
Yeah. I mean, it
six
depends.
months. Let's say six
Yeah.
months. We're
six
just for the
months.
sake of this example, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it could be cosmetic, it could be less. Like we
Yeah.
understand. I'm just trying to bring the point home because
Yeah.
this is what I didn't understand until you said it. I understand as in I didn't know about this technicality. In 6 months, you could go ahead and get a contract. I think contract. I'm always thinking in my terms, midterm rental. Get a lease, right?
Yeah.
You get a lease, you lease those bad boys from 65 occupancy to 97% occupancy, right? In on month number 8, I can go back to the bank and be like, hey, listen, here's what I did. And here are all 19 leases. And yes, they're on the second month, but you can see that they've signed until for out to a year. I would like to refinance. Is that kosher?
That is kosher. You nailed it.
Damn, that's what's up. So I didn't realize about the speed. Right, I was actually always under the impression that, and again, we understand that this could change from lender to lender, but I was always under the impression that, hey, like, show me your what do they call it? Not just rent rolls, but your there's a term that they use. My
Oh,
gosh,
profit and loss statements.
no, not even that. Your 12,
Oh, trailing 12, trailing
trailing
12.
12s. There you go.
Yeah,
Like, I'm like, I don't know if that's because at the time, when I used to call a lot of the multifamily, I played in that space for a little while. That was a big one, trailing 12s. So are we saying that that was just the best practice, but it doesn't really have to be? You could even probably be aggressive. And if you're very aggressive, you could be to pretty much be just banging these out. Is that what I'm
100.
hearing?
Yeah, 100%. And some like it all depends on, I think, having banking relationships or knowing a
Hmm.
commercial loan broker or a residential loan broker or both is so important because they give you access to many different lenders and every lender's different. Like some banks
Mm.
will require a year of seasoning, some banks will require no like I've done deals where the commercial bank just like needed a rent roll and they're like, yep, that's fine, we're good to go. um but like it just depends on the lender because every lender has their pros and cons, right? Some lenders will have really good rates but really bad leverage. Some lenders will have bad rates but really good leverage. Some lenders will have more flexible prepayment penalties. Some lenders will be very conservative but they'll be very easy to work with. Some lenders are aggressive but a pain in the ass to work with. So they all have their pros and cons, and you just got to figure out like which two or three banks you mesh with the best that you can like execute every single time with.
Yeah, and so when you go into deals, this is going to be my next kind of transition is
Yeah.
I always like to think of the who, not the how. So definitely your lender is your best friend. You got to know which one to pick based with respect to the asset class that you're tackling or the deal itself. For you, does it look like two or three or four? Like just so people have an idea, like when you've done over, I mean, 100 plus units, you know, and all the volume of transactions that you've done, what has worked for you as far as your Rolodex of kind of contacts? Is it two to three that you typically rotate? Is it three to five? Like, what does that look like?
Like lenders, you mean?
Yeah.
You know, that's a good question. It really, I mean, especially now because the interest rate market's so messed up. But I'd say for a long time there, we had like one or two banks we relied on. It was Axos Bank and First Republic. And First Republic went down, as you probably know. That was like the best lender in San Diego. And Axos Bank was a big one, but now their rates are way too high. So now we're working with some other banks. So it has changed, but I was rolling with like one or two banks for a long time there until uh, you know, things hit the fan.
What happened to your properties when that happened? By the way, I'm just curious.
The values in San Diego have stayed very steady. They have gone down a little bit, but like 4 or 5%. But values haven't really decreased that much because there's simply not a lot of motivation here, and then people have a lot of equity. Like a lot of properties in San Diego are generational assets, so like people have inherited them. It's like a family property. It's like their gold mine because they own an asset like a couple blocks from the beach. Why would they ever sell it? So there's not a lot of distress here, but there is some, but the big challenge we're facing right now in our market is that there's not a lot of volume. Like there's not a lot of transactions. It's very hard to make a buyer and seller come to an agreement on pricing and terms. So
Mm.
that's like the biggest challenge in our market right now is just lack of volume. It's like a standstill. It's like a standoff between buyers and sellers. Like who's going to lower their price? Who's going to raise their price? You know what I mean? So it's kind of funny.
Interesting. And what I was also asking is like when First Republic went down, is like what happened to you? Because you're saying that was your lender. Like what happened to you that?
Got it.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, we still have First Republic loans on our properties, but Chase Bank bought them out. So
Oh,
JP Morgan is now our lender. So
so,
Chase Bank is now holding the loans on the properties that we did loans with them.
That's interesting. Damn,
Yeah.
that's crazy. Going back to the trading up, because that really interests me. Um,
The what? Sorry.
the trading up. So
Oh,
you
trading
talked
up. Yeah.
about trading up, and I know in my case study I built it up as a refinance, but you specifically said that you realized pretty quickly that you know all the big ballers, right? The way they get to wealth is by trading up. So let's say instead of that refi, we say, hey, I want to trade up this asset I built up. Talk to us about what that process looks like. Are you locating the next deal first and then ready to put this deal on for sale? Are you selling it and then you're doing the 1031 so you only have 45 days? Like, what does that trading up process actually look like behind the scenes? Because we can hear it, sounds hot, sexy, all good, love it, but I'm sure there's a process behind the scenes that is maybe not like snap of fingers, right?
100%. So it's a great question. Your biggest enemy when you trade up is time, right? Because I told you that after you close, you have that 45-day window to identify that property. So time is your biggest enemy when you say, hey, refinancing doesn't make sense. I don't like the rates that I'm seeing. I don't like the amount of cash out these banks are giving me. So I'm going to sell this property. I don't like this location anyway. So I'm going to sell it and buy a bigger property in a better location for my retirement. Okay, cool. So you decide to do an exchange. You're going to meet with a broker, myself or anyone else out there in the world, and they're going to advise you on well, before they advise you, they want to know what your goals are, right? So you want to ask yourself or ask your client, if you're a broker, you want to ask them, like, what are your goals? Like, what's your ideal property you want to buy? What location do you want to buy in? What kind of return are you looking for? So after you get those questions answered and you locate exactly what kind of property you want to buy or the criteria, um, you want to, it's kind of like the chicken before the egg, right? Because when
Mm-hmm.
you go and locate the property, like your perfect property, you can't buy it yet because you haven't sold your property. So I always tell my clients, when we have your criteria, let's make sure that, when a property comes in the market or if we find something off market, you have the power to close on it. So what we do is we list their property right away, and we tell them the listing period takes a long time because a standard transaction is 30 to 60 days.
Mm-hmm.
And what we do that's different than some people don't know how to do is we bill in extensions of times for our clients. So we'll give them like 2 30-day extensions so that they have an extra 2 months to, shop for their next property instead of being, held to the gun at 45 days and a 30-day close. So we do
Can you
longer escrows.
can you explain that the
Yeah,
extension again?
yeah. So before we go into contract, let's say you're the buyer, I'm the seller, and I'm going to trade up and do an exchange into a larger asset. If you make an offer on my property, I'm going to say, hey, thanks for the offer. Million bucks works great. I'll take the offer, but I'm gonna counter you and say, or my agent will and say, hey, I'm doing a 1031 exchange. I have to disclose this to you. So I'm going to be pressed for time. So I want, at least 60 to 90 days longer escrow in order for me to do a
Mm.
deal with you. And then usually, I mean, it's not really a big, like, buyers usually don't care. They'll say, yeah, that's fine. 30 to 60 days is fine, extra. And then we'll go into escrow, and then we'll have,
Then the time actually starts.
then when you have a mutual agreement and you have an offer signed up with both parties, then the timeline starts. And then when you close and you sell, now you own the property, Ruben, and I sold. Now I have 45 days to find something if I haven't found anything yet. Usually, what I find is that most of our clients find something they want to buy before they even close, but which is fine because you can go into escrow on the property that I'm going to buy when I'm already in escrow to sell my property to you because I know it's going to close. You've committed to the deal, and I can now tell the seller of the property I'm going to buy, hey, my property's in escrow, so I'll have money in 10 days to wire to you to buy your property. You know what I mean? So
Got
it,
it. And
it,
just so
it's
I
a dance.
understand, no, it is an interesting dance that you kind of baked in, which I really like. But just so I understand, because we're in attorney, I don't know what the word terminology is. We have closing attorneys. We don't work with title companies,
Yeah.
so we don't really. I don't know if we technically open escrow. I know that's used in those states. So just so I'm clear, at what point does the 1031 exchange 45-day timer tick? Because I'm trying to understand the how you're buying time. You're basically disclosing that 60-day kind of buffer that you're putting in, and it only comes into, I guess the 45-day only kicks in what, when they sign or when
No,
there's
the
escrow?
45-day the 45-day identification period
Hmm.
starts after the property sells, like, actually closes escrow.
Mm.
So, like, for example,
Okay, that makes sense.
yeah.
So you've basically bought yourself enough time to get the other deal figured out. The only question, because he says like the chicken or the egg, is what do you know? Do you kind of forecast your buying power based on the potential value that you think you're going to be able to sell it for? Like, how do I make sure that I'm still qualified, even financially? Do you just have to have money in the bank and or raise the capital with your partners, and then also know that, hey, by the way, we're gonna get a large credit from the 1031? Like, how do you position yourself? For example, you have this 20-unit property that's worth $1 million, maybe you got another $1 million in the bank, but then you're looking at a $4 million asset. Like, how do you position yourself and know that, do you base it on what you have in the bank and base it on what's going to sell, that last one you're going to sell for? Is it kind of just a gentle forecast of, hey, we anticipate we're going to sell this for this much, therefore we can start looking at these type of assets? Like, what would you advise if you were my broker, for me to be able to comfortably start looking at other properties without having sold the first one?
Yeah, so you gotta know your equity position. So we gotta
Mhm.
understand what your property's worth. That's my job to advise you. And then we have to know how much you owe on the property, so what your mortgage is.
Mm,
And then we'll know after fees and commissions how much equity you have to play with in order to buy the property that you're gonna buy for your 1031 exchange.
okay.
Yeah.
So there you go. And just like that, that's how we trade up.
Yeah, I mean, that's like the simplest terms. Of course, nothing goes perfectly, but
Yeah.
if you know what you just listened to in the podcast and you have the knowledge to, yes, trade, sell your property and buy a bigger one. And I highly encourage it if you do own like a smaller asset, because, would you rather own 10 houses in different areas, or, one 10-unit complex? It's a lot easier to manage when you own, less locations, more units in the same location.
Mm. I love that. So tell me, what was you know, I have two questions. What was your beginning? What did it look like? And why did you choose to stay in San Diego? I heard you talk about landlocked. Also I heard you talk about the benefits, but I also heard you talk about I don't want to call it a negative, but I heard you say, hey, in order for me to get, 100 unit, that would be like a $50 million property here. So is there a strategy? Is there a reason why? Is it because your business is there and it's vertically aligned and you know the market? Like, what are some of the reasons why you've decided to stay in San Diego when some investors are usually running across to the Midwest or the Southeast, etc.? Just so we understand.
Yeah, I mean, the reason why I haven't diversified out of state or out of area is because, I'm a very active broker in this market. So we do a lot of deals and we understand exactly what values are at. And I have a good, system here. So if I want to go to Phoenix, I have to restart all the systems. Like, I have to get my contractor team, I have to get my new property management company. I gotta, get a good, lender or bank out there. I gotta make new broker relationships. I gotta kind of restart what I'm doing, and I don't think it makes sense to do that unless I'm at a higher level. Like, if I can buy large properties out of state and I'm confident about that, then yes, I will eventually do that. But as of right now, I have a unique competitive advantage in my market in like the smaller, quote unquote deals. So if I go to a new market where I know nobody and I've never done a deal before, I'm going to be running in circles for a long time. So I'd rather maximize my time and take advantage of the opportunity I have here in San Diego and be really focused before I start looking into other areas.
Got it. What did the first deal look like, Jason?
The first deal was a duplex. First deal was a duplex, and it was $630,000, and it was a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house in the front. with a studio in the back. It was a duplex, and it had a 2-car garage on the back right of the property, and it had a 1-car garage detached on the front of the property. And in San Diego and California, we can add what's called accessory dwelling units, ADUs. So
Hmm.
what I was able to do was legally convert the garages into a 2-bedroom, 1-bath, and a 1-bedroom, 1-bath, and I made it into a fourplex. And all in all, I spent about 400K on the renovations and the development. I was into it for like a little over $1 million, and the property appraised for $2.1 million the next year. So that was one of my best deals yet.
Damn. So you started off out. So that process, uh, where'd you get the 400K? Did you save it up? Did you borrow it? Was it a hard money loan? What was the process in getting that loan?
Yeah, the money was actually directly out of my pocket. I'd saved up a good amount of money for from brokering, and I got a loan. So I put 30% down on the $630,000 as a bridge loan, short term 2-year loan, high interest rate, but they gave me okay leverage.
Why
It was
bridge?
it was interest only because it was so messed up, right? So a bridge loan, in the simplest terms, you get a bridge loan when the property is, in shambles, when it's old, tired, and it's not operating correctly. So that's why I got a bridge loan to lower my interest costs in the beginning and to get more leverage. They did the bank did pay for some of the rehab. They paid for about 150 grand of it, but the other 250 I had a front. But for someone who is watching this show and says, I don't have that much money lying around, great. You don't have to. You can either bring in a partner that does, or you can find private money from other sources at a higher interest rate to cover you as well. So if you're watching the show and you're thinking, damn, how am I going to save up that much money? You don't have to. You don't need any money. If you have the right people and the right relationships, you can make a deal work and get a piece of the deal, even if you're someone who's, has no money in their bank account.
Love that. Appreciate you highlighting that. And from that 2 unit, so I guess what were your margins on that? I mean, let's do the math. You put in, 30% for 630 down, you put in for about 400K in there and you came out 2.1 after, did you end up 1031? Did you end up selling, paying capital gains taxes on that? What happened after with that $2.1 million valuation? What did you do with it, Jason? Tell us what you did with it.
Yeah, so that property is the reason why I know the valuations, because it got appraised, and it got appraised because I did a refinance. So on that property, it made more sense for me to do a cash out refinance because the cash flow is really, really strong, and I couldn't beat it if I bought a new property. So it just made sense to hold on to it, and it's brand new, basically new construction, so it's very low maintenance. And I thought, why not just keep it and let it cash flow? And I pulled out most of the money that I put into it, so ended up being a really good deal.
Yeah, and plus cash out refi is a non-taxable event, so
Yep.
you're getting all the money up front, or I guess in your case, pulling the money out, which is, and then what did you do with that?
I reinvested. I bought a Ferrari. No, I reinvested. I
Oh my
reinvested.
god, I so wish, and then you sold it. Oh my gosh.
I reinvested into another property, a fourplex down here.
Yeah, no. Where I was getting at is you probably traded up, and then what did the trajectory look like? Fourplex, and then what?
Um, yeah, like the first year I bought a lot of like 2 to 4 unit properties. And then something I didn't mention about the 1031 exchange is you have to hold the property for at least 2 years to actually
Ooh,
sell and not pay capital gains. So I held the properties for 2 years and then I sold them. And then I went into a 16 unit property, a 10 unit property, an 8 unit property, and a couple others. So all like within like the 20 to 10 unit range.
and what are the price points for those?
The most expensive property I've bought to this day was 4.8 million. It was a 11 unit property, a block from the ocean in Pacific Beach here in San Diego.
You still got that?
I still have it. Yeah.
What's the unit mix?
That one is 5 studios in the front with private front yards, uh, pretty big size studios. And then the back has 2 3-bedroom, 3-bath units with ocean views. And then it's got 2 1-bedrooms on the bottom. and then it's got a two bedroom to the on the left side of the property. So yeah.
What's the rent for those?
The studios rent for, I mean, it's pretty crazy saying it out loud, but the studios rent for like anywhere between 25 to 2600. The one bedrooms rent for up to 3000, and then three bedrooms rent for up to like $7,000 a month.
Yeah, I mean, I came from New York. I'm not appalled by any means from
True.
the
Yeah,
city.
yeah. You have very high prices there.
But that's what's up. I'm wondering if those could like, because I know a lot of my guys here involved in boutique hotels, but like you're talking about front view. Is that something you've ever considered at all or no?
Um, Consider what again?
I mean, I'm kind of saying that with knowing that the answer is no because you focus on what works. But
Oh, boutique
boutique
hotels.
boutique hotel because like you got the front ocean. Like I don't know, I haven't seen the property, but it sounds like that would crush it as a boutique hotel.
It would crush it, but the only crappy part about Airbnb and short-term rentals here in San Diego is that you now have to have a permit to run a short-term vacation rental. So unless you're like commercially zoned as a hotel, it doesn't make sense to run a property as a boutique hotel because
Hmm.
you can't have that many permits on an 11 unit property for yourself. So I would
Yeah,
love to, but I don't know that space too well. I know it's amazing. I have friends who do very, very, very well with short-term and mid-term rentals in San Diego, but
yeah.
yeah,
Rich Summers.
I do. Yep.
Yeah, that's my guy. He was on the pod too. We connected earlier in the year. I know he's running that play heavily, and
Yeah.
his whole thing is if you understand, and a lot of our listeners are very familiar with the short-term rental space because that's and mid-term rental space because that's our world. But what the opportunity and the reason why I know Rich was saying when he was on this episode too is the reason they were multifamily investors, but then the numbers were getting squeezed, and so he kind of ran. He had a couple Airbnbs out in Phoenix, etc. So he knew the operation, knew the play. But what's really interesting is like a lot of these mom and pops buildings, um, or even if they're zoned for hotels, they're just renting things on paper. They're not optimizing with technology and these smart locks, etc. So if you're a seasoned Airbnb operator and you understand, it's essentially plugging and playing very similar structure, not the same, but a very similar structure, right? You got your cleaners, you got their operations, you got someone front desk, or maybe you don't, and you cut out the operations or at least the expenses. There's a big opportunity there for those who are not really operating their short-term rentals with the technology that they should be leveraging. And half of these people who are operating these Airbnb, these hotels are not even using OTAs, right? Like booking.com and Airbnb. So there's a huge opportunity right from the get go to like turn it on and just run it. I'm not saying it's 100% easy, but I'm saying when you've been seasoned in the space, that's where the opportunity was at. So I thought you might find that interesting, but yeah, just thought mutual connection in the space in your neck of the woods.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, but you're obviously what you're doing is working. Tell me what's next, brother. How can we tap in?
Yeah, Ruben, thank you so much, man. I really appreciate you having me on. You're a great interviewer and you got a great podcast here. So I'm sure the listeners got a lot of value out of your show in general. You got a lot of episodes. So I listen to some myself. They're all great. It's cool you had Rich on. I kind of listened to some of that episode. I interviewed Rich myself. He's got some cool things he's going on right now and with
Yeah.
his boutique hotels. But yeah, for me, I have my own podcast too. I'd love to have you on. It's called Get Out of the System.
Yes,
We
sir.
interview entrepreneurs or wannabe entrepreneurs, want to get out of the system and be their own boss because, W-2 is where you go to die. But yeah, so you can connect me with me on there or my Instagram, pretty active at Jason Joseph Lee. But yeah, thanks again, Ruben.
Man, absolutely, man. And go ahead and conquer the rest of your day, brother. I appreciate you coming on. And just like that, Experiment Nation, tap in with Jason Joseph Lee. You see the link there. Just like that, we are out. Experiment Nation, podcasting has changed the way we operate as real estate investors ourselves, and it can do the same for you. Podcasting has been the source of the masterclasses that we get thanks to the world-class real estate investors and practitioners and specialists that come into the lab from all realms, from short-term rentals to mid-term rentals to real estate syndications to even software as a service. Owners, founders, entrepreneurs have helped enrich our experiments by giving us the education, helping us build a network, and lastly, and most importantly, a brand association to open up multiple doors for our respective businesses. If you understand the power that podcasting can have and you know that you need one for your brand, please, you can rely on our team. InvestedTalent.com is my team and the team that helps this podcast, the Real Estate Experiment, become the fruition each and every single week to educate my community, build relationships on the air, and continue to build our brand. If you know that you need to do the same for your brand and you haven't pulled the trigger yet, maybe because you don't know how, our company, InvestedTalent.com, does the end-to-end from the time that you record, from the time that it is published, to even repurposing content on multiple social media platforms. That's what my team can do for you. Simply go to InvestedTalent.com and book a discovery call to see how my team can help you launch your podcast.